I give a fuck? Why do I give a fuck? Why do I try so hard? Why do I care so much?
Welcome to Why Do I Give a Fuck? A cross-cultural conversation between myself, Deanne Tate,
and Johanna Thompson. In these times of great struggle and possible shift, we ask ourselves,
why do we give a fuck about any of it? How does the lens we see the world through impact what we see?
And what do we do about it?
Well, welcome to all of our listeners and to my colleague and friends in this conversation. How is everyone today?
We're good.
Oh, glad to be here and coming off of our other two episodes where we got to spend time in South Carolina. So this is so appropriate to continue the conversation on with one of the guests that was in our circle so that we can build out some more relationship building and some more sharing information with each other. And we come to this conversation today so that we can kind of deep dive into some of the conversations that we got to have in our circle and some of the impacts that come out of our circle. And so we have Dr. Tiffany Harris that's with us today, and I'm going to pass it over to my colleague Deanne to say hello, welcome us into the space, and also introduce our guest today.
Yes, we're so excited. We haven't had a guest on in quite some time, so we're very excited that you're with us, Professor Harris. And I'm just going to do a really quick intro. Professor Octavia Harris is with us. She was with us on our Charleston episodes, as Jay mentioned, and quite by chance, we were very excited to have her join us on the day of. She was the lovely surprise guest that came and joined us for the episode. But she is a professor at the College of Charleston in Charleston, South Carolina, and so I am going to take a moment to read her bio from the website there. So Dr. Tiffany Octavia Harris is an assistant professor of educational and social foundations and affiliated faculty in the African American Studies, Environmental and Sustainability Studies, and Women's and Gender Studies programs at the College of Charleston in South Carolina's Low Country region. She is a down-to-earth Kamya from Atlanta, Georgia, who is grateful to learn from and with Low Country Binyas. Tiffany's background is rooted in her experiences as a former social studies teacher in Atlanta public schools, but also as a homegirl with Saving Our Lives, Here Are Truths, an intergenerational art-based collective celebrating Black girlhood. Professor Harris is proudly an inaugural mentor for Sisters of Septima, a teacher leadership initiative geared towards women of color. As a Southern Black Native or Afro-Indigenous woman from a working class background with invisible disabilities, she investigates how social and cultural foundations in society relate to schools, which I bet there's a lot of work to be done there. Tiffany's interdisciplinary scholarship intertwines autoethnography, culturally relevant pedagogy. Yeah, I know. Woo! Culturally relevant pedagogy, Black girlhood and feminist studies, digital humanities, indigeneity, speculative fiction, traditional ecological knowledge, and the U.S. South, all fused into teacher education, which you just blew my mind as a teacher myself. She therefore intentionally examines perspectives outside of education to address schooling disparities by envisioning pedagogy as activist, ancestral, environmental, metaphysical, familial, liberatory, and spatial elements.
Yes. First, let's take a moment to clock it.
I'm telling you, man. You are doing the thing.
Absolutely.
That is amazing.
It's really important for us to take moments really to uplift like the amazing work that Black women are doing across the world, especially socially, culturally, to make sure that our footprint is acknowledged and also to like amplify some of the concerns that we need to be thinking about, especially as it comes to education, which is so important. We talked about education on our podcast before. Folks know that I removed my second child out of the educational system completely because I didn't want her to be harmed by the content that was approved to be taught. And I'm in Florida when I'm on the United States. And so we know with Florida what's going on as far as the educational system and really throughout the South. So to have scholars in the space, and what a gift it was for Dr. Harris to come into our circle on that day, just with a conversation, just coming into a room in the way Deanne was explaining earlier, and bringing a wealth of knowledge and a fruit of historical relationship actually that happened in the circle.
I like that.
And the way that we were introduced to that was an opportunity for us to have a discussion about it, especially because we just talked about celebrating 250-year anniversary of the United States. And that goes into a conversation about the relationships that we've developed and created as a result of the socio-economic structures of the United States and the way that we have a hierarchical scale. And so there was an opportunity for us in our conversation to have an experience that we thought was really important for us to come back to, reflect on, and think about better and not better, that's not the word I want to say, different ways of engaging each other for more effective. So yeah, welcome to our stage. Welcome to YDIGAF, Dr. Harris. I'm happy to have you here.
I'm glad to be here. Thank you.
I need to give her a little applause.
Aww.
I love using the applause button. I don't get much chance to do it. So thank you for coming and letting me do that.
Thank y'all for having me. I'm looking forward to this conversation.
I want to give you the floor a little bit, though, to kind of talk about your work and things like that you
I thank you for reading the bio. As I mentioned to both of the hosts earlier, that is a recently updated bio. So I write the bio myself, and I write it in third person and trying to imagine folks on the other end taking it in. So it's an interesting task of how you pitch yourself to other people, right? And it's what do I want people to take away that I'm doing? Ultimately, I would say that my work is connected to us thinking about our humanity, especially the humanity of Black and Indigenous people, but then how honoring that humanity then is good for everybody, honestly. In addition to that, is teaching these really complex topics to students, right? As Jay mentioned in the label, both of you mentioned, but Jay, you mentioned taking your daughter out of school system in Florida. How do I mention this to people who are entering college, who may or may not have ever had a Black teacher in their life? Because statistically, the teaching field, according to the National Center for Educational Statistics, is 80% white. So for some of my students, I'm the first person of color, first Black teacher that they've ever had in their life. It also makes me think about when we first met, when you all were in Charleston for the viewing. I was there to meet another guest who was a part of the circle, Akua Page, and she was doing a documentary, Sunflower, or Geechee Sunflower, and I was really excited. She put out a call, Black Southern women's relationship to land. I was like, yes, I'm down for this. I had no clue. I had not been to the Jenkins Youth Center campus before. I know I heard her talk about it. So I just saw cars at that building. So I was like, oh, this must be where Akua is at. And I feel like I stumbled in to you all's conversation, but glad that I was there. So I guess another thread that I try to approach is anything related to community, which is how I met Akua, and also just the fact that I'm a teacher. I know when you all first met me, you were like, you're a doctor, you're a professor. Yes, I did work really hard for it. Yes, it is an accomplishment. Believe it or not, Black women are, we have the highest amount of PhDs, yet we're very small within academia. So very oxymoronic there. But I think what I try to lead with is that I'm a human first. I don't think I should be given preferential treatment just because I have a PhD. Black life, Native life is valued regardless of what your status is in society.
Thank you for that. That's absolutely, and we give an F about that. We give an
Yes,
F
we
about
do.
one, about achieving some, the educational goals, but then also recognizing the humanity and the indigeneity, excuse me, not the indigeneity, but the humanity of all of us, regardless of where we fall on our educational spectrum, because we have lived experience that is as valuable. And that's what I was talking about when I was saying our indigeneity. We have lived experience that is as valuable as the experience that we get going through an educational system.
Absolutely.
In the United
That's
States.
what the autoethnography is. You
Yes.
did a great job of saying it. I should have prepped you ahead of time.
Oh, I knew I was going to say at least one of those words. I did pretty well.
That's exactly what that is. I basically examine my life, right, as data to think about how can we think about social and cultural critique of the world.
Mm,
That's wonderful. And we all should be doing that. It's wonderful reflective practice for us
yes.
examining our lives and recognizing the data that we offer into our larger data sets. That's actually being collated as we continue to play on our technology and use our AI. All of that is really being coalesced together. But that allows us to do a lot of community building, which is why we have to have this conversation today, because I don't know if folks are able to observe this either visually by watching us or listening to us, but Dr. Harris and myself are having this engagement. We're having this conversation. And when Dr. Harris walked into the room, I think I was probably the first person that was like, hey, what's going on? You here? You're here to join us in our circle. And there was this organic camaraderie, this familiarity, this that Dr. Harris and I immediately, jumped into as we were introducing ourselves to each other in that moment. And Deanne was there. And I'm curious, Deanne, I'm going to pull you into this conversation. As you were seeing that engagement between myself and Dr. Harris, what was your experience of that? What were you feeling in that moment?
Well, I have to say I was probably a little out of body because we were just about to record this episode that we had been working months to put this together. So I had a lot that was probably taking myself out of myself a little bit in that moment. I was very excited to meet you, Dr. Harris, and was so excited when it all kind of came around that we invited or asked you if you would like to join us in the circle, and you were like, absolutely. And we had a time of leading up to this where we had invited other people to be in the circle, and some folks had dropped out. So our numbers were this, and then they dropped down to this, and then they had started to fill into this. And then, so I was very much in my logistics head, which is where my left brain tends to go in terms of planning something. So I was very excited to have another person there that is going to be in the circle, round us out to 10, that you were coming with this wealth of experience. And as a professor from College of Charleston, I felt like in as I was thinking about who we were going to invite, thinking about all the different voices and trying to get different angles or different perspectives from different guests, I felt like you just felt it was just synchronistic that you were there and that you could fill that spot. I do remember there was a moment in my excitement and apparently another person's excitement, which is funny. I don't even remember that part of it, that that I know I interrupted you a couple of times as you were describing your very short bio life story to Jay. And apparently there was another woman in the circle that was also doing the same, which I didn't even clock. I didn't even track. I only remember myself doing it. And I know that Jay asked me to be quiet so that you could finish your thought. And
Deanne is being polite, y'all. I'm just gonna name that out here in these streets.
Okay.
I was like, white ladies, be quiet.
Yeah.
This woman is speaking. Hold on, stop it. So that's really actually what happened, because and the reason why I asked Deanne how she was feeling in this moment, I want to go back to an earlier episode that we had when we were talking about the nod, right? And we really explored, and when I say the nod, Dr. Harris, you know what I mean by the nod. The nod for those who haven't listened to our other episodes is when people of the same cultural context come into community with each other, they see each other, and they give each other a nod of acknowledgement. I know that you're here, you know that I'm here, we got each other. We in the same space together. And especially when we're in environments where there are other folks with us. So the nod. So
Mixed
in this
company.
moment, Dr. Harris and I were having an extended nod. We were celebrating. I was celebrating the fact that she was a PhD, because to her point, yes, a lot of Black women do have PhDs, but a small percentage, and a small percentage of them in academia, a small percentage of them getting tenure. And so I was in a very celebratory moment in that, and I was very excited to hear about the studies and the learning and all of that. So we were having an engagement. We were having a nod, extended nod, and I, whereas Deanne is communicating that she was in the outer body preparing for production and all the structure, I was in the, yo, sister girl is here, good, we can have her in the conversation, she's going to bring all this richness into this conversation. I was like super excited and very narrowly focused on that. So having two other humans interject as Dr. Harris was communicating who she was and telling more of her story, I did in my body start catching frustration. And so when I say that Deanne is being polite, I was very aggressive in the, hold on, be quiet, ladies, this woman is speaking. And then they were quiet. And then Dr. Harris could continue saying what she needed to say. So there was a moment of tension for me in that moment, of an experience of Black folks being in space, white folks coming in, because both of the Deanne, for those who can see her, is white identified, and the other person was also.
No, the other person was a Black woman.
No,
yeah.
It was no. It was I cannot remember her name.
Oh, was it? Okay. Then when you and I had our DPAG about it, then I was thinking it was somebody else. I was thinking it was a Black woman.
It was the woman from the chamber.
Gotcha.
Yeah. What's her name? Because I want to acknowledge her as well.
Sandy.
Hi, Sandy. Okay. And so it was me like, hey, ladies, just give a second so that Dr. Harris can finish what she's saying, because I also wanted to hear her and I couldn't hear multiple people. So I got into like attention, frustration, trying to hear everyone, but being focused on what Dr. Harris was saying, because Dr. Harris was the one who was speaking, who had the floor. And so there was, I know, a reaction and a responsiveness to that. And this is what we want to talk about. We want to talk about, in those moments, what's going on and what are the best ways for us to take care of and be in consideration with each other. And that's why we thought it was really good to have this reflection and have this opportunity. And when we were having this pre-conversation before we actually got into the recorded circle, some of the engagement before the circle resurfaced while we were in the circle. And so I specifically, coming on this the screen, I specifically had impact on that I reflected with Deanne first, and then we decided that we wanted to bring in Dr. Harris because she was a part of that reflection. So that's where we are, and this is the conversation that we're having today. And so now I'm going to turn it over to Deanne, since we've given some context, to help us to see specifically when we were in our circle what occurred that we are here today to have a reflection on.
I'm wondering if you want me to tell the story about it, or do you want to just share the clip? Share the clip. Okay.
If that would be helpful.
So I isolated the section of the oops, as I'm going to refer to it, or the ouch. And so we'll play that first, and then we'll kind of unpack it on the back end. So I'm going to do this. Before we started our conversation, our newest guest that joined us this morning, Professor Harris, who was sharing her story of living in Atlanta and having family there and the connections, she was speaking into an ancestor of mine who, I think it was your great-grandmother or your grandmother? Your great-grandmother that used to clean houses for my ancestor. And so, and we've never met before today. And so it's those connections. I don't know exactly, I don't want to center, it's not about me, but it, to me, it speaks to why these connections are so important, because there is so much propaganda and there is so much false information. The narrative weaving in this country is so incredibly strong to erase that connective tissue that we share, and to craft it. And Charleston, in my opinion, is particularly good at that, which is why I felt like coming here was so important to have this discussion, because they've made an art form in this city of weaving that narrative that you're walking around in this history all the time, and yet the only thing that's the thing that's most predominantly presented to you is the five scripts, is the stories. That's a phrase that Godfrey gave us the other day when we took his tour. And it's just we've had many conversations the week that we've been here about how, I don't even know what the word is, how cunning and how deceptive it is, that how cunning it is to be walking around being told one thing, actually stepping on the earth of the other, the stories of the other. But and anyone in a white body like myself, Jay, I've said a couple of times, we're oblivious, and Jay's like, well, not all of us. And so, I do understand the difference between how I present into the world and how those narratives are woven specifically for my comfort, so that I won't know the real story until I dig, until I want to know.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for that. So I'm not sure how many people were able to listen to our episodes. If you haven't, this is a great opportunity to go back and revisit them, because it was a really fantastic conversation that we got to have. And now I'm just curious about Dr. Harris. Every time I see that clip, I do have a responsiveness to it, because it was an impact for me, because I will, as we continue this conversation, communicate the way that it landed on me, the way that I felt about it. But I did want to invite Dr. Harris to offer some thoughts about the moment and the experience.
Sure. I was going to ask if you just talk about your initial reaction and then we go from there, because I think that kind of goes along with the sequence of events of you then calling me. So is that okay? That
Absolutely.
You okay.
Yeah. So the impact of that was the truth of the matter is white folks always have to center themselves. That's what I want to say, because what was happening before we got into the circle is a celebration. Myself and Dr. Harris were having a celebration about her academics and all of those kind of things. And then there was this moment where it was just like, okay, I'm connected to you also in this way, but I'm connected to you in this way. And it landed on me as we're celebrating all of the accomplishments, there had to be this reminder that regardless of how much you've achieved, your forefathers still worked for me and cooked and cleaned in my house. And for me, that was a harm space. That was just like why did that even need to come into the conversation? We're celebrating, we're talking about accomplishments, we're talking about the present. Why are we bringing this back? And hearing the clip, the contextualization of that makes sense, that we want to make sure that we are honoring the history and the stories that we have. And so I understand what the relatability of that is. And you can even hear how I'm trying to make sense of it. I'm even speaking about it in this moment, because I didn't see where there was a need to highlight that in that moment where we're celebrating accomplishments and achievements coming from a place where there was so much, there's always been a disparity in resource and access to resource. And so for me, it sat like, and I didn't know if it was just me. So after that impact, and even after we had done our recording, I reached out to my people and was like, hey, am I wrong about my reaction to this? Because I had a reaction, and most of the people were people of color, and they were like, nah, that's messed up. I don't even understand what was the reason why it was brought up in the space. And I was like, because I have a relationship with Deanne, I knew that the intention, I'm very confident in the intention being, it wasn't to be harmful or in that kind of way. It was just the thing that happens with us being reminded of our positionality in the United States. And that was the thing that for me is always going to be jarring. It's always going to be jarring when I hear folks come and remind us of our positionality, regardless of how much we achieve. And so that was what I was holding in the heart. And having the conversation, being able to have that conversation with Deanne and then say, okay, I had that responsiveness, but the reality of the situation, Dr. Harris in the moment was like, oh, wow, this is the thing. Let's take a picture. I'm gonna tell my family and all of this kind of stuff. This is a connection that is an unusual connection and is a part of my story and journey, which is another part of what was happening in that moment. And so now I'll hand it over to you.
Okay, thank you for that. I think, yeah, all of that helps to situate what was going on. Thank you all again, both for having me here. I think in the moment I got caught up. I think I would probably refer to Du Bois' Double Consciousness, as well as Hortense Spiller's Cultural Fiction. They're both saying it in similarly yet different ways, which is this idea of two-ness that Black people in the United States and arguably worldwide, but the United States, given chattel slavery history in this country, so maybe the Americas, we could say. And maybe that is what happened for me in that moment. Deanna, afterwards, we took the selfie and I was like, wow. I showed my mom, I called my mom that day because I was like, you'll never guess what happened. I think I was so caught up on it being a faded, pleasurable moment. I don't know if all the other parts hit initially. And I think in some ways that speaks to the experience of what it means to be Black in this country, which is you have to learn how to, I'm gonna go back to Deanne, the outer body, we often have to be outer body. Like, is this happening to me in that moment? And perhaps I am so used to being outer body in different ways that when Jay called and when you talked it out, I'm like, well, maybe, I didn't even consider all of that. I think because what I've also learned is whiteness is going to center itself. And I'm so used to that I've learned to try to take the sweet spots. And I think I was so stuck on, as you read my bio, the ancestral connection, that was where I was on the high. That I the other parts probably maybe I didn't think about as much. It makes me think about my family. Now I live in Charleston and now I live around a bunch of plantations, but my family took a trip. We're from the Atlanta area. We went down to the Georgia coast. So basically the low country of Georgia, still a part of the Gullah Geechee Cultural Heritage Corridor. And we went to Halford Bradford Plantation. And I was still in grad school then. And I was kind of like rolling my eyes because I was like, I don't like how these people are curating the space. I don't like what's being said. Is this, like the real history kind of thing? So my family knew I was a little grumpy and not necessarily happy to be there. But as soon as we got inside the house, I saw my mom's face light up. And her face lit up because she said, that's my grandma. That's my grandma. She saw furniture that reminded her of, and I have to correct myself. I realized in the taping, I say great grandmother, but she's actually my great great grandmother. Her name is Katie Davis. So I want to take time to honor her. We call her Mama Kate. My family, I called my great grandmother grandma. It's a whole thing with relations there of how we name people. So I have to think about it. But my mom was like fixated on that's my grandmother's furniture. And I remember the rest of the time I lit up. I was bothered. She saw my grandma in that. And I'm like, wow, in this place of what we know chattel slavery to be, horror, right? My mom still was able to have a moment of joy out of it. It kind of makes me think about the movie Down in the Delta. The family has the candelabra. It's an excellent movie. I would recommend it. It's like 90s, mid 90s. I think Alfred Woodford is in it. But there's like a family from up north. They send the child down to the south for the summer. They go to Mississippi and they kind of find out this family legacy of one of their ancestors was sold for a candelabra. And so that candelabra became an heirloom that they passed down to each family member to say, hey, this is what someone saw our ancestors' life as significant as. So I think for me, it took me back to that moment. And yeah, it can be a teaching moment. It's layered, right? And Deanne, I do want to compliment you. Looking down at notes, sorry, that's the academic in me to not, if you all remember during the
No
taping, I said for my
worries.
brain not to ramble, I have to. I do appreciate in looking at the taping, you saying connective tissue and you saying it's not about you. But I think Jay is also reminding us what are those insidious ways that whiteness can still be centered, and how do we all work to actively decenter it?
Yeah.
Thank you. That's powerful. Yeah.
Thank you.
The active decentering of whiteness on U.S. territory, which is a really difficult thing because U.S. territory is based on the comfort, is exactly what you said in the video, Deanne, the comfort of whiteness, white comfortability. And so how is it that we can acknowledge that and think about ways that everyone can feel like they belong so that it's not just focused on white comfortability in the spaces. And so now I have to turn that over to you as our resident white person in the city. Let's make it like, yeah, from this conversation, what are your thoughts that you're having from all of this?
Lots of thoughts. I think I want to say, first off, thank you to Dr. Harris for, Jay and I had a very in-depth conversation as we were deciding how we were going to move forward with this. We were talking about, do we cut the clip out? Do we leave it in? I was like, let's leave it in, because if I screwed up, I want to be held accountable. But then ultimately it was like, we need to ask Dr. Harris if this would impact her, because if it was going to cause more harm to you, then absolutely let's cut it out. But then we need to have a dialogue about it. So thank you for being a part of all of this and this process and giving us a chance to further unpack it. The centering piece I struggle with, because I know that centering, and I'm remembering, Jay, that you commented to me after the recording was over and everybody had left and we were cleaning up, and you said, you didn't say a whole lot during the taping. And I said, well, I was trying to make space for, we had 8 other people. It wasn't just the 2 of us. And I was one of 2 white people in the circle. And so I was conscious of not taking up space. I don't know how to not center, because my mind besides the fact that my mind is, cultured in whiteness, if I'm speaking in I statements and speaking to my lived experience, I don't know how to do that without centering my experience and centering whiteness, because my experience is whiteness. So while I hear that critique and I want to do that better and differently, I don't know how to do it, because it ends up being centering and I don't mean to sound like I'm helpless in this, but it's a dichotomy that I struggle with, and I don't quite know how to do that differently. And I don't think we can find the answers today, but I wanted to speak that into the space in case there are any white people out there listening to this that might wrestle with the same thing. It's like, how do I bring my lived experience into a conversation without centering myself, because I know that just whiteness in and of itself is always centered. So that's one thing that comes up for me. And I, in this podcast, we really have, Jay and I have always, even before we decided to do this, have always wanted this to be about like modeling how to have these conversations. And so when Jay spoke with you, Dr. Harrison, and you were open to having a dialogue, for me, it was an opportunity for us to have that conversation like on air so that people could see it. I am feeling compelled to apologize to you for that moment. There was a sense of relief for myself after Jay had a dialogue with you, and I was able to talk to Jay and find out how it went when she relayed to me how the conversation went. when she said that you expressed that you were genuinely excited and we took the selfie together and you wanted to show your mom, I was like, phew, I didn't totally misread that, because that's how I perceived it. I did not perceive in the moment that harm could have had happened in that moment. And so there was a sense of relief that I felt when Jay relayed to me that you had expressed that you did feel the things that I felt, that two-ness, I guess. I felt the moment that you were in the moment before you had maybe the chance to reflect, or before Jay brought you into that further dialogue. Um, and I also understand, in watching the clip back, when we first got the rough cut back and we were watching it, the concept that harm happened in that moment. The diminishment of, by bringing that in to the dialogue, it was me putting you in your place. I see how that can be perceived, and that is where the apology comes in. That absolutely was not my intention, but I have learned that intent does not lessen impact. And so it doesn't matter what my intention was. The harm was there. And having this conversation with you live, and on recording, is my way of trying to make amends and know that I will take this lesson with me and fold it into my learning to maybe do it differently next time. So
I acknowledge it. Thank you so much for that.
absolutely.
Yeah, I think it's a complicated thing, right? And I think we are all constantly learning, unlearning, relearning all of these things. Um, and I don't know if I know how to teach white people to not decenter themselves, right? I
Yeah.
think that's something that white people have to do amongst themselves,
Mhm.
right? There are all kind of how-to guides too. I think this is in a day and age of internet. I think about this at work often. I bring up
Mhm.
issues and people are like, "Well, I don't know what to do." And I'm like, "You gotta get on the internet for everything else." So I
Mhm.
think that this could be a moment, and I'm not saying this of you directly, I think just in general,
Mhm.
perhaps it's an invitation, right? Of how do we get online and read different books about decentering whiteness? Do we make
Mhm.
it a book club? Do we do a watch party of a movie like Get Out or something, and to think about it? Because yeah,
We
I
laugh
mean,
because we laugh
That's
because
the
all the
movie that
things
kept
we're
getting
naming is
mentioned.
oh, it
exactly
comes
what
up?
we do on this. We do that. We talk about Get Out. We talk about the movies.
Yep.
Yes, yes. So,
Actually,
and I love movies, right? I love movies for precisely that reason, that
Mhm.
visual representation. Um, but again, that two-ness, I can watch a movie and have a whole nother takeaway from it. And so
Right.
I think it's a call for how are white people who are committed to this work,
Mhm.
what are they doing individually, but also collectively with other white people? I think this is what I also try to challenge my students to do. I'm not going to say it's easy, but it's different to do it in a space where we say we're all social justice oriented, we're all allies, we're all whatever language we want to use. It's a very different thing to then go to maybe some loved ones who have
Mhm.
not said nice things about the other, as you mentioned, growing up. For me, that's the dirty work. That's where we
Mhm.
really got to sit, and that's where the change happens.
Yeah, absolutely.
thank you for that. And this is what I do appreciate about the opportunity for us to be on this platform and having this conversation, because it is a model. We always go back to, let's have these conversations so that we can also show that you can have them and the harm not be what people have an expectation of, right? And it's also people sitting here in consciousness. This is not just something that you can jump into and decide that you're going to do in community. This is like work. This has been time. Again, Deanne and I always talk about, we have had years of relationship building to a place where we can be honest, where even though I had the impact, I didn't immediately have a conversation with Deanne. I had to
Mhm.
I had to think about, how am I going to approach it? I had to speak to other people to make sure that I was not, that the way that I was impacted by it resonated, that it wasn't just me having that impact, because I have such a relationship with Deanne. So I had to like check in with myself, and all of that maneuvering for me felt like historically the spaces I've had to negotiate in places. And so then it was just like, I have a person that even I'm in this negotiation, other white identified humans that I've had this experience with, I did not. I didn't. I just let it alone and chopped it up to what it was. But because there's relationship, it was like, okay, I know that I can say this. And it was perfect when the video came, because then I could also see, and hear responsiveness in the circle too at that moment. So seeing and hearing the responsiveness in the circle says, we can't let, when impact is visible, we can't let it just pass by. It's important for us to stop, to breathe, and to reflect, and to say, how can we address this with each other so that we can be more aware? Another component of this that was very interesting is in our post conversations, asking in the moment what the actual feeling was and the need and communication. So I'm hearing out of body experiences, but there was, if I may, there was a moment, and this is my personal curiosity about things happening for reflective check-in. Okay. There was a moment where I asked Deanne, Deanne had communicated to me, I was surprised at Dr. Harris's responsiveness. And in that moment when I was like, well, if you were surprised at the responsiveness, then there was a part of you, this is my brain thinking, there's a part of you that might have known that there would be harm in it. And so if that is existing in that moment, what is the benefit then of even communicating it? And that is what I'm talking about, where automatically and culturally whiteness centers itself. And I think it's important to bring that up, because it's not the first time that this has happened with a white identified person. I had another experience where some stuff was going down, or somebody was talking about something, and I'm in space with white people. And to your point, Dr. Harris, white folks holding themselves accountable with each other on what the reflection should be. And I'm in a space with white people, and this communication is happening, and this man says something, and I'm like, I'm having the same impact. And then when I have the post conversation with them, another person I have a good enough relationship to address it with, I'm like, but did you know that it was going to be harm in that moment? And if you knew that people were going to respond in that way, what is the thing? Like, what is that thing that makes it, I'm going to say it anyway? Where does it come from? Is it unconscious? Or is it just because we have like this hierarchy of our social connections with each other that it just happens? It just, a microaggression just happens. And that I'm always trying to figure out the root. I'm always trying to figure out the root in that space. Like, yeah.
Would you like me to offer a response, or? I mean, I hear what I heard you say, or a couple of things that stood out for me in what you just said. First thing was that my surprise of your response, Dr. Harris, when we figured out that connection before we started recording, that my surprise maybe should have let me know that that should have given me some sort of message about the possibility of harm with that circumstance. And of course, I'm looking at it hindsight, right? Which is always, different than in the moment. So I'm trying to think about like where my head was in the moment. And I mean, again, I'll go back to the out of body, the logistics, thinking we're about to record this episode that we've been working months on. And so I know that I was not very centered in that moment. I was kind of all over the place a little bit, not to excuse, but just to kind of set context. And so did I take my awareness of surprise at your response, Dr. Harris, did I take that and then go to the next step and say it could there's harm there? And no, I didn't. I don't know why I didn't. I don't know that I could speak to why, but it's definitely an interesting nugget of transition in my own brain to maybe reflect on and try to. I'm always trying to, in unpacking my whiteness, I'm always trying to like come up with processes of how to do things differently, because so much of it is instinctual or rote, because I'm so deeply indoctrinated in all of this that a lot of times it happens without forethought. And so how do I create the gates, if you will? I've used that term before in some of our dialogues, Jay, that I have to go through to stop myself from causing that harm. And that's going to become one of my gates, is if I'm surprised by somebody else's behavior or response to something, that I don't necessarily need them to confirm for me that there was possible harm. I can just see the potential for that based on how I responded and do it differently going forward. And so thank you for that. I appreciate that.
And then I also, to your point, Deanne, thank you for being able to be vulnerable enough to communicate that, because I want to be realistic about what we're talking about. We were in an organic conversation. All of this stuff, when you're just having and meeting people, all of this reflection is not going to happen. So let's just be clear about all of that. But it is to know that as you're having these, and if your body is feeling some type of responsiveness, when you go back and reflect, and if you have the opportunity to then reconnect with the people that had the impact, that's what you do. Because in the moment, there's no expectation for you to be like, oh, that just said something, I'm surprised, and oh my gosh, and let me apologize to you. That ain't gonna happen. But it is like in the moment where it's just like, oh, this thing happened. Oh, I recognize that. Oh, I felt this way about it, because Deanne also communicated to me she felt the way about me shutting them up when I
did have a response to that. Yeah.
But we didn't communicate about that response until we're having this conversation later. So it's not realistic, and we're not suggesting to people that it's realistic in the moment.
Yeah.
What it is an opportunity to sit in space, and if there is knowledge about the fact that there could have been impact, how do you reflect on it? And then what are the different ways that you can engage the person directly that might have had the impact, even if you're just sharing with them that there was impact? Because Deanne and I came to this conversation with me not having an expectation of Deanne, but saying, yo, man, I have to tell you, I had this impact. And then because we have a relationship, we could deal with it. But it was me saying I had this impact. That was the catalyst to being able to have a broader conversation. And what's important as we're going with the next 250 years with trying to be a better country, this is an opportunity to look at what our social relationships are, how we engage each other, and methods of reflection and reaching out to keep these connections. Because at this point, now I feel, okay, I have a stronger connection with Dr. Harris because we had this experience. I know that my connection with Deanne is deeper because I know that if I have impact, I can communicate, we can talk about it, and we can think about the different ways that we can exist with each other differently to make sure that there's more, that we're amplified with each other rather than diminished or limited with each other.
Absolutely. Right. I mean, after we spoke about my visceral reaction to your telling me to be quiet, and you were like, why didn't you say anything? Or why didn't you? And I was like, because I'm training myself to not say, especially to a Black woman. I'm not going to, that's not it. I don't need to tell you that something you've done has impacted me. I need to sit with that impact and figure out why I felt the way I did. So, but you expressed to me that you wanted me to be able to say, hey, that impacted me. I knew it impacted me in the moment. I even felt it a little bit afterwards, but then I let it go and I wasn't going to bring it up. But that doesn't necessarily set us up for healing or processing or any of those things. So So yeah, and and even down to, we're going to reach out to Professor Harris, but who's going to talk to her? We've
Mm,
made a decision for Jay to call you, because
mm,
if the harm, depending on how you were impacted by the circumstance, me calling you out of nowhere and saying, "Can we have this dialogue?" could have been opportunity for more harm.
mm,
So we decided that Jay would be the one to reach out. So there's thought behind all of it, and there's still, you know, we still have to have, I have to have grace for myself, and we have to have grace for each other to know that
mhm.
this stuff can't always get resolved like in the moment, like you said, Jay. It's the back end is just as important as the moment, I think.
Yes, and it is resolvable. That's
Yes.
that's the beautiful thing.
Yes.
And I appreciate what you just said. It makes me smile. There's thought behind all of this. If
Mhm.
we are attributing thought behind
Yes.
all of the things that we do, that's what we give a fuck about.
Yep.
That is it. That is
That is it.
Yeah, this is good. I'm taking away the body as a site of knowledge. So much of all the
Mm.
isms take us away from our body. Obviously,
Mm.
capitalism, labor, you're on a cycle of I gotta work, I gotta do this. Okay, I'll clean tomorrow, I'll do this tomorrow. But I think, as I mentioned, I guess in my self introduction, the focus on humanity is to not only think about the harm that has been done to BIPOC people, but I think there's a dehumanization process that happens to white people in order to not treat other people as human. So I think, and
Mm.
what I'm hearing is maybe you are tapping into that part of your body, right? Which is,
Mhm.
hey, something is going on here. And like you said, yeah, you got to sit with it. It's going to take time. It's not an overnight process. I
Right.
think that's a big takeaway I want whomever is listening, but especially people who are white identified and probably even white passing, to take away is that this is lifelong work. This is
Yeah.
not just hey, I went to, so many workshops or sessions. I have that Black friend, I have that queer friend. You got to keep doing it. And I say it because I'm still doing it, right?
Mhm.
In many ways, whiteness is a system, right?
Yeah.
We are impacted by it differently, but guess what? I learned whiteness just like you did. So
Mhm.
I have to constantly unlearn it. How it may manifest with me is going to show differently, but I know it because I'm still impacted by it.
Yeah.
So
And
yeah, I just appreciate the willingness to learn and go deeper. What were you saying, Jay?
I was saying, and with that, that's the mic drop right there.
Oh my goodness.
Thank you so much for being with us for this conversation. I really appreciate it. And
Of course.
I just appreciate being in this space all the time, because it is growing me by leaps and bounds. So
Thank y'all for having me. And whoever is listening, I try to see it. I'm gonna take it back to how I started that day. I was there to meet with Akua about Black Southern women's relationship with land. And
mm,
how I see it with my students is it is a maturation process, right?
mhm.
From germination to full bloom. And for some students, I'm not gonna see them bloom. I may just break the earth because it might be like, ooh, this soil needs a lot of tending. And that may be all that I see, right? That may be all of my
Yeah.
part in the process of watering. Some I may see little buds, some I may see a seedling come up, but I think to see it as a longevity process and to not center yourself as I'm the good white person in this moment,
Mm,
but rather of, hey, how am I taking this moment? How is it impacting me? How will I use it to be a better person and
yeah.
make this world a better place in the future?
Amen.
I appreciate you. I appreciate you and this conversation. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Likewise.
Why do I give a fuck? Why do
Thanks
I
for joining
give a
us.
fuck?
Until next time,
Why
as you
do I
move
try
throughout
so
your day,
hard?
continue to ask yourself,
Why do I give a fuck?
Why Do I Give a Fuck is produced in collaboration with Johanna and Deanne. Music by Norwegian musician Water. See you next time.